Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Chemical weapons.
It was an unprecedented moment at the United Nations General Assembly. The President of the United States, in front of other world leaders, criticizing an international agreement negotiated by another American president.
The Iran deal was one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States has ever entered into. Frankly, that deal is an embarrassment to the United States, and I don't think you've heard the last of it.
The nuclear deal is the result of about 10 years of posturing and 2 years of negotiations, and unfortunately, this administration is going back to posturing.
Today on Talk to Al Jazeera, Iran's foreign minister responds to President Trump. He also discusses the geopolitical changes going on in the Middle East, from the efforts by Kurds to create an independent state in Iraq and the siege of Qatar, to the rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia. All of this when we sit down with Iran's foreign minister, Mohammad Jawad Zarif.
Let's start with Iran's nuclear issue. You know what President Donald Trump has been saying in terms of it being a bad deal for the United States from his perspective. How seriously do you take that?
Well, I think it is an ill-informed statement because certainly any deal would not be a perfect deal for all sides. It has to be less than perfect so that all sides could live with it. The deal has elements that we don't like. It has elements that the United States doesn't like. But it's not a bilateral deal. It's not even a multilateral treaty. It is a part of the resolution of the Security Council, which was negotiated in 2 years. Very difficult negotiations. So I believe that the United States would be much better off if the United States agreed to abide by the deal. Because if it didn't, the international community would never trust any commitment by the United States, because it is possible that the administration or the future administration would not like the deal, and at any time it could walk away from the deal, or any deal. I think that would be a very bad precedent.
Now, how concerned are you about when Donald Trump and his allies, particularly inside the United States, the Republicans, talk about slapping sanctions again on the Islamic Republic?
Well, you see, the United States has had a policy of imposing sanctions on Iran for the past 40 years. Basically, they have immunized us to US sanctions. But from a global perspective, it seems that the United States is addicted to sanctions. And they believe, they have an obsession. They believe that sanctions do work. In fact, I think they should have learned by now that sanctions don't work. You cannot impose pressure on countries to abandon their sovereignty, to abandon their dignity for a few restrictions that the United States has imposed on them. I think the sooner the United States realizes that this type of behavior, this type of policy is bound to backfire, and it's bound to create resistance and strengthen the resolve of the people to pursue their own policies and their own interests. The sooner the United States achieves this important recognition of reality, the sooner it can adjust its policies in a way that would even serve the interests of the United States better.
When you hear these statements coming out of Washington from Donald Trump and his allies about the agreement not being a good one for the United States from their perspective, and you hear the statements about, reimposing the sanctions, for you, is that where it stops, or do you also hear the war drums?
Well, I think, you see, the nuclear deal is the result of about 10 years of posturing and 2 years of negotiations, and unfortunately, this administration is going back to posturing. What is important for Iran is that we have maintained our options. We have a number of options inside the deal and outside the deal that are open to us, and we will exercise those options according to our national security interest. We have no control over what the United States does. Obviously, the deal has reduced the options that are available to the United States. And if the United States makes the wrong decision to withdraw from the deal, then Iran has the option of withdrawing and has other options.
We'll come back in a minute to the other options, as you called them, but when you listen to the statements by particularly President Donald Trump, do you just hear the voices of US foreign policy, or do you also hear the voices of allies of the United States in the region, the Israelis and the Saudis, who, as you know, are very unhappy, as they say, with Iran's role regionally?
I see both. I see part of certain more hotline elements within the United States talking, and I also see those regional players who were used to a smokescreen of Iran or the nuclear deal in order to justify their own bad behavior, their own disruptive policies that included violations of the rights of the Palestinian people, trampling upon their most elemental rights for the past 70 years, which has resulted in turmoil in our region, aggression against every country in the region by Israel, a nuclear weapon policy that has continued to threaten not only the region but the global non-proliferation regime pursued again by Israel, and an unfortunate policy of supporting extremism and terrorism by Saudi Arabia that has affected our region. If you look at Syria, if you look at Yemen, if you look at elsewhere in the region, the unfortunate Saudi posture against Qatar, these are all policies that are pursued by Saudi Arabia, have been pursued by Saudi Arabia, and they only use the smokescreen of Iran's nuclear program as a way to hide behind it and to sort of justify their own erroneous policies. I guess the nuclear agreement deprived them of that smokescreen, and that is why they are screaming.
Back to Donald Trump. Do you miss the days of Barack Obama when it comes to dealing with the US administration, or do you feel that ultimately Donald Trump is a pragmatist and he'll do the right thing from your perspective at the end of the day?
I think the situation inside the United States is the business of American people, not ours. And whatever the American people do or don't do, they will enjoy or suffer the consequences. For us, what is important is the global posture of the United States, its global behavior. It hasn't been positive. It has not been conducive to stability in our region. We have seen the consequences of US policies in our region, both historically as well as since President Trump took office. And I don't think they've been conducive to peace and stability in the region. And I believe it is in the interest of the United States if he revisits those policies. I cannot predict whether he will be a pragmatist or not, but I certainly believe that the type of policy that is being pursued, the type of statements that are being made, certainly do not help peace and security in the region, nor ultimately the interests of the United States.
You said that Iran ultimately has alternatives. Can you outline some of those alternatives?
Well, I think the order of the day in this administration is to not be predictable. I want to say being unpredictable is different from being unreliable. And this administration is proving that it can't be predicted and it can't be relied upon. Iran has shown that it is a reliable partner. We have implemented our side of the bargain up until now. 7 reports of the International Atomic Energy Agency verify that we have lived up to our own part of the bargain. But if the United States decide to even further violate its obligations under the agreement, because it has already not been faithful completely to its obligations under the agreement, but if he decides to commit a material breach of its obligations under the agreement, then Iran would have options that have been elaborated within the agreement, including the option of partial or complete withdrawal from the deal, as well as options that would depend on the behavior and the policies of other parties and participants in the deal.
Regionally, you're aware of the positions of countries such as Saudi Arabia, for example, the criticism that Iran it has not been good for the stability of Iraq. Do you see a way out of this situation with the Saudis?
I mean, you made 2 points. Let me address the second first. Yes, we are willing to talk to Saudi Arabia about our differences. We have made it clear to them since we assumed office 4 years ago that we were prepared to talk to them about regional situation, because we do not believe that Iran and Saudi Arabia should have the type of relations that they do have now. We believe Iran and Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region should have a cooperative arrangement so that we can augment each other's security, not try to undermine the security of one another. We believe that the posture in the Persian Gulf by Saudi Arabia is not a positive one. Policies that it pursues against Qatar, other policies that Saudi Arabia has, we believe that they need to be changed, they need to be altered, but through dialogue. That is why we have supported the efforts of the Emir of Kuwait in the Saudi-Qatar dispute, and we have always called for dialogue between countries in the region. We have responded positively to every proposal to engage in dialogue, including the proposal by the Emir of Qatar when he was the chair of the GCC, and the proposal by the Emir of Kuwait when he sent his foreign minister to Iran representing the GCC. So that has been our policy ever since. On your first point, it is a matter of historical fact. Whose policies have been conducive to regional stability and whose policies have supported instability? It wasn't Iran that recognized the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan. It was Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The only two countries that recognized Taliban other than Pakistan were Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It wasn't Iran that undermined the government, the democratic government of Iraq. It was Saudi Arabia. We recognized the governing council. We sent our ambassador to Iraq immediately after the new establishment in 2003. Saudi Arabia failed to send an ambassador to Iraq for at least 11 years. It wasn't Iran that supported the terrorist extremist groups in Syria. It wasn't Saudi Arabia that came to the help of Iraqis in Erbil and in Baghdad when ISIS invaded the country. So we need to be clear about our historical record. Iran has been on the side of stability. Iran has been on the side of fighting terrorism and extremism for the past, at least since 2001. We have a clear, straight record of engaging in every attempt to counter terrorism in the region. And unfortunately, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have been on the wrong side.
The Saudis and like-minded countries in the region, they've heard these positions from Iran reiterated over and over again. Nonetheless, they will say the Islamic Republic has not stopped trying to export the Islamic Revolution ever since the Islamic Revolution took place, and therefore they say that continues to destabilize all these places, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Iran, whether it's Lebanon. What's the way out?
Again, let's look at the fact. Iran is not spending billions upon billions of dollars exporting Wahhabism throughout the world. It's Saudi Arabia. Look at every mosque. Look at every incident of terrorism in the region and in the world. Who are behind these acts of terrorism? They're all financed, both ideologically and financially, supported ideologically and financially by Saudi Arabia. This is unfortunate. Iran has an ideal. That ideal is available. We have a democracy. People participate in determining their fate. My friend, we derive our legitimacy and our security from our own people. That is something that people like. We're not like some who need a foreign umbrella for their security. We're not like some who have to purchase their security by buying $400 billion worth of beautiful military equipment. What makes Iran secure, what makes Iran progress, is the fact that we rely on our own people. The concepts that they are using in order to muddy the waters, in order to justify policies that have brought unfortunate, disastrous consequences for our region, cannot be justified by these smoke screens of exporting revolution. Saudi Arabia needs to stop exporting terror, exporting exclusionist, extremist ideology of hate.
Is there any situation for you as the Islamic Republic of Iran where you would say, yes, we do understand some of the concerns that the Saudis have because these are vital interests for them in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, and therefore, because we do understand them, maybe we can find some common ground? Or do you think that the positions of the Islamic Republic and Saudi Arabia are diametrically opposed all along?
I think even if our positions are diametrically opposed, we need to engage in a conversation with other countries in the region, because we cannot decide for other countries in the region, but with other countries in the region in order to find ways of accommodating. We do not need the type of relations that we have now. I do not think that these relations are necessary. I do not believe that these relations are in the interest of either Iran and Saudi Arabia. And that is why we have said all along that we are ready to talk. We are ready to accommodate. We are ready to address the concerns of all sides, because we believe that geography cannot be changed. We are bound to be neighbors. We have been neighbors for centuries, and we're bound to remain neighbors until eternity. It is important for us to find ways of talking to each other, to find ways of accommodating each other, to find possibilities for addressing our differences through dialogue, addressing our grievances through discussions and discourse, rather than through accusations and taking negative measures that at the end of the day hurt the people of the region. Look at the situation in Yemen. People of Yemen are paying a heavy price. I do not believe that the aggression against Yemen, the bombing of the Yemenis, the fact that 700,000 Yemeni people are suffering from cholera today, I do not believe none of it is necessary, and I do not believe any of it has served any interest for Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates. I believe these countries need to look at what they have achieved over the past several years and see whether they're prepared to follow a different course of action. And if they did, Iran will be a serious partner for them.
What do you think the Gulf crisis has done to the region, you as the Islamic Republic?
As the Islamic Republic, we have a record of insisting on stability, on inviolability of internationally recognized borders, and on non-interference in the internal affairs of each other. We took a strong position against Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. If you remember, Iran condemned the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait before GCC. That is our position today in the region. We believe that imposition, trying to strangulate, trying to suffocate any country is not acceptable. We would have adopted, incidentally, the exact same position if people were trying to do this to UAE, if people were trying to do this to Saudi Arabia or to Bahrain. As we did when we opposed the invasion of Kuwait or measures against Qatar. We believe that all issues need to be settled through dialogue and through greater understanding. And that is why we proposed in 1986 that we establish a regional security mechanism in the Persian Gulf. We are still prepared for that. We believe that Security Council Resolution 598, which ended the Iran-Iraq war, provides us with a framework for doing that, and we have called upon our neighbors to engage in that effort, and we believe the sooner we start engaging each other, the more crises we can prevent. We have gone through many crises. Unfortunately, after the Iran-Iraq war, we've seen the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, the Iraq war, the advent of terrorism and extremism in the region, US invasion of Iraq. We have seen the difficulties between Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and others. We have seen other incidents of instability and turmoil in our region. So the sooner we start discussing these issues around the negotiating table, the better we are in preventing further escalation and further eruptions in the region.
There are people who feel that the countries that have imposed the blockade in the Gulf, they've pushed the Qataris into the arms of Iran. Isn't that a good thing for the Islamic Republic in the region?
No. You see, the problems in the region are all like that. They complain about our influence in Iraq. They complain about our influence in Syria. All of it happened just like the situation in Qatar. They adopted wrong policies. We took the right side. And that created influence for Iran. It's not our choice. We don't like what's happening in Iraq. We don't like what's happening in Syria. We don't like what's happening between Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the UAE, because we believe that what is happening is injurious to the region, and whatever harms the stability of our region harms us, because we're a major part of this region. So while we opened our ports and our airspace to our brothers in Qatar, while we would have done exactly the same had United Arab Emirates been threatened, we're not happy with it, because we believe that these issues need to be settled through peaceful means. We believe that nobody should try to bully others. We believe that differences need to be resolved around the negotiating table, not through these measures.
Now, the Kurds have voted in the referendum. What does the referendum now spell for you as the Islamic Republic of Iran, having your own Kurdish community in Iran, but also looking at other Kurds throughout the Middle East?
Well, again, our policy with regard to the referendum is driven by our quest to see stability in the region. We have been and will continue to be eternal friends of the Kurds. We have our own Kurdish population with whom we have excellent relations, and we've had excellent relations with KRG in Iraq. As I said, we were the first to go to their help when they were being attacked and under the threat of occupation by Daesh. But we consider the referendum, first of all, to be unconstitutional against the Iraqi constitution, and we believe it would create instability, dangerous instability inside Iraq. And at the end of the day, it would not serve the interests of our Iraqi Kurdish friends, who have gained a lot since the removal of Saddam Hussein, and can even gain more through negotiations within the framework of the constitutional legitimacy in Iraq. That is what we have called for, and we believe the referendum was an imprudent decision going on the opposite way of what would be in the interest of the region and our Kurdish friends.
Do they have a right to have their own state ever, the Kurds?
I believe this issue is an issue of regional stability and regional security, and it is important for our friends in Iraq, various communities in Iraq, to come together and maintain territorial integrity and national unity of Iraq, which is an important Arab state, an important regional state. It is important in our region to respect the boundaries, to respect the unity and territorial integrity of all states in the region. Otherwise, we will be facing situations that would be very difficult to control and would harm the interest of all communities, particularly all communities in Iraq.
Foreign Minister, thank you so much.
Thank you.